Okay, next up is Brian Moura.
Okay, welcome everybody, and I'm going to talk to you about a recent shared services project that we had in San Carlos, and we went from a budget deficit to a budget surplus in just over 12 months, which, as our former city manager used to say, is like moving at light speed for local government. Talk a little bit about the challenges, to paint a picture for you. The city had a structural deficit for a number of years, and each year we would cut the budget. And revenues would continue to drop. Our sales tax was down, our property tax flattened out, and we had 4 different revenue measures in the space of 7 years that were defeated. 2 of the 4 were fire specific, so it was clear that even in a public safety measure, revenue was off the table. And yet, similar to our previous speaker, we were having challenges with expenses going up. In particular, over a 5-year period, we saw police expenses go up 20%. Fire expenses go up over 30%, and at a time when revenue was flat or even falling. That's obviously not sustainable. We looked at some metrics, and this is one of the lessons learned and something I would suggest as far as taking a look at your own budget. Because we had cut back in other departments except for police and fire, the share of public safety in our general fund had grown from 50 to 62%, which at the staff level we felt wasn't healthy. And then we started looking around, and the metric that really caught the attention of the community and of the city council was we had a chart showing that trend and then showing that when you get to 70%, you're now at the level in the city of Vallejo. So that was an aha moment, I think, for our council and our community that we were heading in the wrong direction. Similarly, we also had another metric that showed that prior to this multi-year increase in public safety, the property tax and sales tax revenues taken together used to more than cover the cost of police and fire. In 2010, that was no longer true. Again, another red flag. So we started a process to begin to address this. The council was very clear that they wanted this addressed and addressed in a relatively rapid fashion. So the first thing we did to gain credibility with the community is we approached the various employee groups and got concessions. In 2009, all of the non-management employees took a 5% reduction in salary and total comp, and the managers took an 8% reduction in total comp, hard dollars. So we showed the community we were serious. We also dialed back PERS. We had, over a period of time, we had 3 tiers. We ended up with 2% at 55 for miscellaneous, and we changed fire from 3 at 55. It went from 3 at 50 to 3 at 55. Now it's 2 at 50. And we went from highest year to highest 3 years comp. In the area of medical, we instituted a program of sharing premium increases with the employees, and we also eliminated the retiree medical program for all new hires. Tough medicine, but we wanted to show that on the salary and benefit side we were taking strong action. We also began a process of informing the public. We had budget workshops, we had information on the city website, we had articles and news releases from the city manager. He issued one in particular I think caught people's attention, saying that we're at a turning point, that if we're not able to turn the ship around quickly, services in San Carlos aren't going to be like they've been in the past. In particular, this metaphor was powerful. We suggested to the community in March of 2010 in a series of budget workshops that we were offering the council a choice of 2 paths, as we called it. One would involve continued service cuts with perhaps no end in sight. In particular, the then city manager proposed closing parks, a community center, and perhaps even closing out Park and Rec altogether. And interestingly, when that proposal came through, there was a lot of outcry from the community. There was a Facebook group that popped up overnight, 800 to 900 people saying, "Save our parks." Curiously, there was no comparable Facebook group to save police or fire, which was an interesting ha-ha moment. So we talked to the council about looking at the ways we deliver service as the other path, as it were. New models, new ways, kind of nothing is off the table. When we had the budget workshops, interestingly, the public was very interested in that second path that we talked about, the service delivery options. We had several speakers in particular, members of the community who we had not seen before, who were not engaged on commissions or anything. And in particular, one gentleman who said, I want the service, I want the current service level or more, but I don't care what kind of patch the person wears. As long as you're sending police and fire to police and fire calls, it works for me. And as you can see, the council ultimately went that way and said, let's take a look at that shared services option. As part of this, we talked to the council and said, before we start down this road, we should have some principles. And here are the principles that the council ultimately talked about. We want to save $3.5 million a year or more. We think we can save $2 million a year more out of police, $1 million a year out of fire, and $500,000 a year out of park maintenance. We want the services to be at or above the same level, similar to what we heard from the public. We want to try to do this in 12 to 18 months, aggressive, but possible. And another thing that our former mayor said that I think resonates with me to this day, he said, I want 2 or more choices in each service area because these are very high-profile, critical services to this community, and I don't only want to have one option. He said, quote, one is not a choice. And so we pursued that approach. So the results. And I think one of the interesting things as we talk about our model is that in each service area we did something different. So there really isn't a San Carlos approach per se. In park maintenance, we had proposals from several different private firms, and we ultimately hired 2 to do the work. Our costs went down by $500,000 a year, but because we asked for $15,000 or 15,000 hours per year of service, and we were only getting a net of less than that, maybe 12,000 hours after you subtracted out non-productive time from our city staff, we ended up actually having more hours of service than we had before, and hence we tried to make it easy for the private firm to succeed, and they did. We now have better looking parks and more park maintenance service than we had before at half the cost. In the case of police, we talked to the county sheriff and the city of Redwood City, which is a much larger city next door to us. They were both interested in providing police services under contract. And what was interesting is when we talked to each of them, they said they could save us more than the target amount, more than $2 million. So as we worked with each of them to craft their proposal, we actually added some services back in the city hadn't seen in years because of budget cuts, things like traffic enforcement, school officer, et cetera. And we ended up going with the sheriff, and it has been a wild success. The city now has a higher service level than before, and we have saved more than the $2 million net. And indeed, I think the real vector of success was after the first year, I literally had a call from a resident saying, what's up with all the police service? There's way too many police around here now. And I said to our city manager, I said, I'm not familiar with that complaint. I've been in local government more than a few years. I've never heard that as a complaint. So I knew that we had arrived on that. In fire, we had been in a shared fire department with another city. Its costs, as you saw, had pretty much gotten out of control. And so we looked at several different models, including not only teaming with our neighbor to the south, Redwood City, for management, which is what we ultimately did. We reconstituted the city fire department rather than staying in a shared arrangement. We hired our neighboring city to do management, and we're actually now in the process of talking to them about providing additional fire services. And our savings, net savings here is over $1.5 million. And again, we're getting some additional services that we did not have in the former shared fire department. And then in Park and Recreation, we actually responded to and won an RFP with the city of Half Moon Bay, where we're now their Park and Rec department. So we're the service provider rather than the group getting the service. And for those of you who are financially inclined, I wanted to put this slide in. This is a summary of some of the savings that we've had, and notice that word is net. That's not gross, so there's actually more savings. So in a period of a year and a half, we have realized savings of $4.6 million, way over the target, by doing the 3 projects I talked about, as well as working with the county on police dispatch, which is now handled by them, and also code enforcement, where the county now provides that service for us and we share the cost of a position. And as you can see on the table, there's also more opportunities. There's an area in our Hill area where essentially we have 3 stations that could be consolidated, and we could save up to another $2.5 million. So to wrap up some of the lessons that we learned and things to think about from our perspective, it's key to focus on the level of services that you're providing your community as well as the cost savings. And the fact that we were able to deliver both, I think, provided a lot of credibility to this program. Real budget savings and maintaining or increasing services. Similarly, we wanted to look at all options in each area. We didn't have an assumed approach. We ended up with 4 different approaches in 4 different areas. We proved that we were not too small to be a service provider as well as a contractor. And also, as the city fire department proved to be more cost-effective than the shared department, which seemed counterintuitive, but that's the way the numbers ran. And finally, I think it's important to provide your council with choices. They should have more than one choice, as our former mayor liked to say. We should look at pros and cons of each proposal and option that you have. And finally, we found it very powerful to have subject matter experts working with us in police and fire so that we were able to get an honest opinion of the pros and cons of these proposals, particularly with neighboring cities, so we didn't have to be in the position of judging our neighbors who wanted to step up and help us. So those are some highlights, and certainly look forward to your questions and discussion afterwards.